Multigrips, multigrip pliers, water pump pliers, whatever you may call them, they are a common tool in workshops and toolboxes. Often the tool of last resort, although in the case of some DIYers it can be the tool of first resort, they are nevertheless a useful tool. Hello, I'm Bob, and once again a big welcome to yet another episode on the White Dog Garage YouTube channel. Here is part of our collection of 5C collets. I use them either in the mill, held in this block holder, or in the lathe in the collet chuck. With 5C collets they need to be held tightly, and this is done by a thread at the back and using a tube or a ring to draw it in tightly to its holder. Herein lies my problem with multigrips. I've got the tooling stand here now, but that's no different to what I used to use. But you can see a video on making the tooling stand. There might be a link up there. Anyhow, how I tighten it up is I use the multigrips and tighten it up like so. Now the problem there is, if you look at the ring at the back here, that has got a lot of marking from slippage from the multigrips. So it's just a knurled ring, but the knurling is being worn away by the multigrips. But there are holes here for a C-spanner. Now on the collet chuck it's just as bad. To get it really tight I have been using these big water pump multigrips to tighten it up. And of course in the fullness of time, fortunately it's not had a lot of use, and I sometimes remember to put a rag here to stop the jaws from biting in, but in the fullness of time, well, I'm going to end up marking this. It's just something I don't like to do with tools. So with all that, I've got to have a better way. I've got to have a better way of doing this. I don't want to be marking stuff all the time. So what I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to make a C-spanner that will grip this ring and tighten it up without marking it. And I am going to make a big enough spanner that can go across the flats of the collet chuck to hold it while it's tightened up in the lathe. Starting with the manufacture of the open-end spanner to use on the collet chuck, I selected two pieces of metal from my scrap bin to use. The longer piece will form the handle and the wide piece the jaws. Note that I've already cut the handle piece at an angle where it will join the head of the spanner. In preparation for welding, I have beveled the end of the handle where it will attach to the head. I then mark the centre of the handle and the head. These marks will be used to align them for welding together. The joys of using material from the scrap bin. There is a mismatch in the thickness going from the handle to the head. To deal with this, I am using a piece of 1mm thick sheet metal as a packer for the thinner head piece. I then first tack and then weld out the joint where the handle attaches to the head. Now I could have cut the entire shape of the spanner from one piece of plate steel, and there's nothing wrong with that approach. In fact, it will be the approach that I use in making the C-spanner in the next segment. However, I like to be thrifty and always search my offcuts first when I'm making something for the workshop. Welded up, I mark out the piece of metal I will need to cut out to form the jaws of the spanner. The across the flat dimension for the collet chuck is 60mm, but I will cut it slightly undersize and finish it with a file. I then used a convenient tin can to create the curve across the insides of the jaws. I rough out the shape of the jaws using a jigsaw. For the curve, I drill a hole through the head and then use the jigsaw to cut to the right and the left of that hole. Finally, I use the jigsaw to rough out the rounding on the handle end. With the shape of the spanner roughed out, I moved on to filing the jaw to its final size. Viewers may be wondering why there is a side of a hex between the spanner jaws when I set out to make it curved. This is also how the collet chuck head is shaped, so why indeed? I think I will plead a senior moment on that one. Not long before this job I had made a large hex socket. I think in the heat of the moment I may have been thinking hex socket, not open-end spanner. It's not a problem, the spanner will still do what it is meant to do. I then use a combination of the bench grinder and an angle grinder to finish the roughing out of the general shape of the spanner. Material for the C-spanner has again come from the scrap bin, in this case a piece of galvanised lintel angle. Using the collet block ring as a guide, I draw the shape of the C-spanner that I'm going to cut out of this piece of scrap. Saving work, I use the straight side of the angle as one side of the spanner handle. I then use a cutting wheel and an angle grinder to rough out the internal shape of the spanner head. I then finish shaping the curve with the grinder. I then turn my attention to roughing out the top of the spanner, again starting with the cutting wheel. With the C-spanner shape roughed out, I turn to the grinder again to finish the shape. Moving the C-spanner to the big vise, I use a rat tail and a bastard file to make the inside of the C a good fit for the collet block ring. I then turn my attention to filing out the grinder marks on the top of the spanner and improving the final finish of the tool. This is your typical C-spanner. It has a hook there. This is the one that we have or came with, our ER32 chuck. It allows you to grip the outer ring and do it up or undo it as the case may be. You can of course get a generic one. This is an adjustable one and same sort of deal, it goes on. This one will actually do up to 75 millimeters diameter of the ring. What we're making here is a pin spanner, but the common ring that you see that takes pins is like the one here on this angle grinder. It's got 4 holes in the face of the ring. And the sort of pin spanner you need is this style. It's got 2 pins opposite each other and they lock into the holes on the ring, and if you lock the arbor you can undo the ring or do it up, whatever the case may be. The ring on the 5C collet block has its holes in the outside of the ring, not in the face. Now for that you need a C-spanner which has a pin rather than a hook. Now you could take something like this and grind away the hook to make it a pin. You can go and buy a C-spanner or pin spanner for this style. You need to know the outer diameter of the ring. You need to know the diameter of the pinhole. You need to know the depth of the pin, or the depth that the pin needs to go down. This style of C-spanner, that's readily available in most good tool shops. The pin spanner, C-spanner that you need for one of these is a lot more difficult to find. You'll find it in specialist tool shops. I guess in a way that's one of the reasons we're making it here, is that we don't have to go out and source one, but equally it's very easy to make one. I am using a discarded 4mm jobber drill as the pin. Having worked out the position where it needs to sit, I mark this and I will then go on to cutting the end of the C-section to match. Then it is on to welding the pin in place. The drill is made of high-speed steel and the handle mild steel. I'm using a 2.6mm E7018 electrode to weld the two metals together. Welding completed, I cut off the end of the jobber drill with a cutting wheel in the angle grinder. I'm really pleased with how these two turned out. They certainly do the job, and that's the main thing. There was nothing fancy really in their making. There's just some pieces of scrap lying around the workshop, a little bit of work with jigsaw and a grinder and a file, and and a little bit of welding. And they certainly do the job and will go into the toolbox to be used whenever I want to use 5C collet trucks in the workshop. Thank you for watching this video, and I would look forward to talking to you on another video. If you haven't already subscribed, well, I'd love your subscription. Just hit the subscribe bar down below, and while you're there, ding the bell so that you get a notification from YouTube the next time a video appears on the White Dog Garage YouTube channel. Thanks again. Talk to you next time. Bye.